The next one I wanted to take a look at was sort of a quadratic example. Again, sort of a math problem. Certainly things you'll run into on the FE, but in other cases you'll find these on the PE. And a quadratic example would be a second order system. And of course these would be anywhere where you have, for example, more load-bearing members. So you'd end up with second order dynamics occurring especially in control systems. So just a sort of a quick kind of review here of taking a look at the quadratic equation. Here's our standard form for the quadratic, where we have ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. And of course what we want to do is factor those and find out what the actual roots are. Okay, and so we would have then x minus x1, where x1 is the root, and then x minus x2, where x2 is the other root, equal to 0. And of course we can use the quadratic equation for that, where we have x1, x2 is equal then to minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. And of course we have then, this is the, under the radical here is the discriminant. One of the key things here you want to just note is that whether you have, if this goes negative, you have imaginary values. Of course, if you're looking at a stability, structural stability, or other applications you might find in say electrical situations where you'd have amplifiers that were unstable in that type of condition, if you have imaginary values. Anyway, so taking a look at an example here, so here we have x squared minus 2x minus 24. Okay, and we want to find the roots. Okay, so we can use the quadratic equation here. Which is set up here. So the other thing what we'd want to do then is be able to identify what are the actual values from the quadratic equation. So what, in other words, what are our values for A, B, and C? Okay, so looking back at our original equation here, we have x squared minus 2x minus 24. So A would be 1, B would be minus 2, and C would be minus 24. So again, mapping to the original values up here. Putting into our quadratic equation then, mapping in B, and then b squared here, then 4ac, and of course that's over 2a. Okay, so then a couple key things to watch out for though here. For example, where we squared b here, often people will make a mistake out here and square b out here too. So for example, we ended up with 4 here, you'd end up with 4 out here. Reducing that, we find then that x1 and x2, the roots, are basically 6 and minus 4. So one of the things we'd want to do is verify that the answer is correct, okay, and so that what we do is then multiply those numbers back so we can verify that we actually have the same equation to test to see if we go back through the process. So again, what we'd have then is x minus x1, x minus x2. Okay, these are x1 and x2 are the roots, as we see up here, would be equal to 0. So what this means then is as we plug in those values, we see that x1, the value here becomes -6, and for x2, notice with the minus sign here, we end up with a +4. The reason for this is that, again, we're going to end up with 0 out here, so if we put in a -4 and a +4, we get 0, so it reduces the equation to 0. And with a +6, a -6, we'd end up with 0. So now we just cross multiply these out. We end up with x squared minus 6x plus 4 minus 24. Reducing that again, then we find that we have our original equation, so our answers check out. Okay, so that's pretty cool. That's following the standard math process. Okay. What I wanted to show you, though, is how you can significantly speed this process up and how you can check your answers on the exam. Okay, so one of the things here wanted to be able to do is check something here. So one of the things we can do is take a look at the fact that we have actually a -24, and so what we'd want to do then is with the -24 is how could we possibly get a -24, and look at what would be set for doing that. So we can see that basically for a -24 here, we must have x and x1, or x1 and x2. Basically, we must have a positive and a negative value. Okay. Reason for that is the only way we can get a -24 here is by having a positive and negative value. If we have two negative values, we'll get a positive result. Okay. Witnessing here, basically we have a -6 and a -4. Okay, so we'd end up with a minus value here. Okay, so in order to figure out what the roots are, first off the bat, we know that the roots would have to be a positive and negative. So anything that is two positives, so if we have two positive roots, or if we have two negative roots, those answers would be not correct, because that's not going to give us a -24. The other thing we can do then is because we know that it's a minus and a plus, so we know that both the roots. So we also know then if in order to get this second position here, basically would be adding the values, as we see down here where we're adding -6x and positive 4x. Okay, so we know that because they're a positive and negative, we're going to add them to get this second value here. We know that there has to be two different between the two. So we can use those to sort of sort answers on the exam that way.